Hi, everybody. Super excited to have everyone joining today. We're going to be kicking off a series of webinars on the themes in GSV's 2025 to 2026 Envisioning PreK to Gray report. I'm really getting the opportunity to dig deep on each theme with a set of experts. And on that front, I'd like to welcome today both Claire Zhao, our AI lead and partner at GSV Ventures, and our two experts, Brandon Sammut, Chief People Officer at Zapier, and Dr. Patrick Gittisriboongul, the Superintendent of Lynwood Unified School District. Hey, everybody. It's great to have you guys all here.
Good to be here, Jen.
Thanks for having us.
Really happy to have you guys. To start, we're going to kind of talk about building trust, right? It is kind of the cornerstone for successful adoption of any technology. And as pervasive AI kind of reshapes our world, we want to discuss and help builders think about how to better understand fostering that trust. In our report, we had outlined 4 main critical pillars that we thought were critical to developing that. That was reliability, predictability, control, and benevolence. But with you guys here, what I'd love to hear is, like, how do you define trustworthy AI internally, and what kind of must be true in order for you to even be willing to start with like a pilot on a product?
It's a great question, Jen. You know, the one of the anchors or success factors for us has been anchoring any type of pilot or experimentation with AI in something that the team already deeply believes in. And I think that's true for all of our organizations, right? We wake up every day with teams who have a mission. Our organizations have goals. We have a strategy. And, you know, kind of like you were implying, Jen, you know, AI is a technology. And like any technology that came before it, it's a tool. It's not an outcome. And so we find that in addition to things like, you know, reliability, predictability, and so on, like anchoring the team in the why for experimentation with AI is really helpful in all of our organizations, right? Zapier included. Like, we have those ingredients, but we need to make the connections. And we find that that is the building block on which we then work on things like, you know, reliability, and also benevolence. You mentioned that too, right? We talk about trust in AI, but because it's usually, you know, leadership teams calling their organizations in to adopting AI, that benevolence piece really stood out to me in the report. Like, really resonated, because, you know, if your team deeply trusts its leadership, they are that much more willing to go there with you, and also that much more willing to raise their hand when something isn't going as expected, which I find particularly important when we're experimenting with AI.
Yeah, I think Brandon, I would agree with you in all aspects. Let me just first start by saying thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Claire, as well. And shout out to Abby and Tiffany from GSV as well. I'm just excited to be here for the conversation. So a little background about me. I lead Lynwood Unified School District, which is a district of over 10,000 students in LA County. We're sandwiched between Compton Unified and LA Unified. So you can imagine, we got a medium-sized district. We got a large conglomerate like LA Unified. But like many districts, you know, we're asking a lot of these big questions, like what does it mean to integrate AI into our schools in a way that's safe, it's inclusive, it's equitable, it's empowering. And then your question, Jen, is really around how we build trust, right? So that AI adoption, AI literacy, all these kinds of things that we're really embracing isn't just kind of a top-down decision, but that many of our teachers, our parents, our students, our community members also know what they're using and the inputs and outputs that matter to them. So when it comes to the framework that you guys have put together, those 4 pillars, I think, really resonates with us. I think your first one was around reliability, right? So, you know, as I think about that, when we pilot any type of AI tool, you know, do we check if it's correct? If there's missing data pieces, if there's, you know, hallucinations that we've talked about. You know, I think in your third one, control and benevolence, you know, I think when it comes to control, I've stated this before, is when it comes to any type of AI tool, humans in the loop is a non-negotiable for us. So any system, any platform, any type of ed tech tool, you know, if it doesn't give humans the opportunity to be in the loop or trigger a human interaction, to verify, validate, looking at whatever inputs and outputs are out there, I think that is a miss. I would also say that, being able to override features, being able to have teachers stop, edit, correct some of these AI outputs, I think that's going to be key as well. Your fourth point around benevolence, I think, as a superintendent, I think we want to make sure we instill those values of student safety, inclusiveness, equity within our environment, our community. And so, whether that gets operationalized into data sharing, data privacy, any of the kind of policy-esque related kinds of things, I think those are going to be key. In Lynwood, we have, I think we borrowed this page from the food industry. We have an AI fact sheet. So we want every tool to consider that AI fact sheet before we implement, before we adopt. So that fact sheet asks questions like the intended use case, the training data, how you evaluate hallucinations, bias. And so that type of fact sheet is very important for us as we think about some of our AI tools that we're going to adopt.
Patrick, I love that you brought up a couple, it sounds like red flags, like things like not being able to have humans in the loop in the entire process. I'm curious to hear, especially for both of you, obviously the companies that approach you are very different. Brandon, it's traditional enterprise SaaS. Patrick, it's K-12 tooling. I'm curious in the pilot process and when you're having conversations with these potential vendors, what is your framework? I'm curious, you're obviously looking for certain things like reliability and control, but are there any sort of red flags or kill criteria that you've seen, at least in evaluating the many companies that I'm sure have approached you both?
It's a good question. Building on what we heard from Patrick, I agree on the control piece, and in particular, human in the loop. And I'll give you a couple examples. In the recruiting space, there are a variety of really interesting new AI-powered technologies that can help hiring teams make faster and more well-informed hiring decisions. So the promise is really interesting. A non-negotiable for Zapier is that we still need a human in the loop to make the hiring decision. Our approach is to use technology, including AI in some cases, to help us make better decisions, but the us is still humans, not the technology. And so any tool that we might be considering that doesn't provide the type of human in the loop moments that Patrick was keying us in on isn't a good fit for us.
Yeah, I think for us, this kind of leads into benchmarking, and then I think you guys know about some of these models and these benchmarks that are out there. Whether humanity's last exam, if some of these models can't pass humanity's last exam, then are these tools like impactful in a human way? So going back to Brandon's point about humans in the loop, whether there are companies that have whatever benchmark that they've done, which oftentimes can be very misleading. And, if someone says MMLU, no one's going to know in K-12 what MMLU means. It's going to be the developers that know what MMLU is, right? So I think for us, if there's opportunities for folks to really look at and develop a K-12 type of benchmark, and what I mean by that is, if I say, show me all the ninth graders that are at risk, the definition of that risk means different things to different people. And sometimes that nuanced language of at risk could also be translated to at promise, right? So, being able to interpret language, being able to identify nuance, context. I know that there's oftentimes reinforcement learning that happens in the space. There's inference that happens as well. So all of those areas, to benchmark tools, to look at tools, to fine tune, to think about, I think of data labeling as an area that is often missing in the K-12 space as well. I know data labeling is a huge thing that many of these, big 5 AI firms and big tech firms are already doing now. Scale AI, prime example right there. So, but there's no data labeling that happens in the K-12 space. So, and I think those are the things that I'm looking at in terms of companies, platforms, vendors that are coming in and trying to market to K-12. I often ask the question, how are you benchmarking it? How are you labeling data? What are you doing in your organization? Are you just, giving a context window and just doing the same stuff that we could do as well, right? Give it, deep learning, all the kind of stuff that developers already do.
Yeah,
So a loaded question. So that's a loaded answer.
I was just going to bring up really quickly, and Jen, I want you to get to your question, but exactly what you're saying around just pushing things like MMLU benchmarks. It's so interesting because you'll have these companies talk to us or talk to you all that are like, we're, so close to AGI. And then, recently Anthropic testing Claude to run a vending machine and it going from having $100 to losing $20. So it's just interesting seeing that discrepancy between, we have all these crazy benchmarks and we're so close to AGI, but then it can't actually do the role of even running a vending machine. Sorry, Jen, I cut you off.
No, not at all. I think that's a great call out. And I think what I wanted to double click on in terms of the benchmarking is, Patrick, who do you think is well suited or would you trust to create what is the right K-12 benchmark? And kind of similar question for you, Brandon, like as you think about the enterprise space, like, thus far the benchmarks have really come from the foundational AI builders. Who do you think would be good and would you like to see take on the responsibility of building relevant sector benchmarking?
That is a fascinating question. Been asked a lot of AI questions in the last 3 years or so. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that one. I love that question. So here's kind of off the top thinking on this. And this actually is a bit of an extension of how we think about like who we really lean on inside our own organization for their like AI acumen or expertise. We find it's a combination of like fluency with the technology in the core concepts, but then domain expertise. You could call that craft, you could call that subject matter expertise, whatever the case may be. So let's say we come back to like the recruiting use case again, what type of organization, would trust for benchmarking or even just the design of the offering more broadly. It's really those two things. And so we see all kinds of interesting startups, for example, getting into all of these talent related like AI use cases. Some of those teams have actively staffed up with like deep subject matter experts who for years like have been obsessed with what excellence looks like in talent development or talent evaluation or recruiting. But a lot have not. They're really indexed on like the technology and this type of thing. And it's like, hey, that's great. But remember, right? Like the impact that we're trying to get from any technology is really the combination of what the tools can do or what the technology can do, and then how you harness it, how you train it, design it, and develop all the way through the front end, like how it actually interacts with your stakeholders, whether those are students or recruiters, whoever the case may be. So that's something that we look for, and that ends up being a pretty significant differentiator when we're looking at vendors for a given use case.
Yeah, I agree with Brandon. I think it alludes to the emerging professions that you also reference in your document as well. I think, as it applies in a K-12 setting, I don't think I'm going to be hiring an AI curation manager anytime soon, just so you know. So I'm not going to be hiring a predictability architect either. But I am hiring teachers, support staff, counselors, mental health experts, licensed clinical social workers that really understand student need in a really meaningful, thoughtful, compelling way. And so being able to apply some of those same concepts in an AI world about, hey, can you trust this input and output? Can you really take the tools and inform and design systems that, not replicate, but augment what's happening? I think that's where I'm looking at more kind of the literacy, more of the foundational skills, more of the things that really our students from an age appropriate level, can really start developing early on. So we talk about, I think Brandon mentioned fluency, right? So, I think AI literacy is not just, knowing and understanding it, but being able to use it, being able to evaluate, and developing that AI fluency / proficiency in a way that is competitive with the world, right? So, if I say vibe coding, you guys get it. I tell some of my teachers are like, what's vibe coding? Like if I say you can build your own ed tech widget, you can build your own ed tech tool, you can build whatever you want now, you can just prompt it, their minds get blown. So that kind of experience, that kind of skill set, that kind of mentality and paradigm is definitely going to be a major shift in a K-12 setting when, again, we've gone through this before, but I think that when AI can really not only give you the answers to the test now, but also tell you why you got the answers wrong, and also tell you how to find a tutor, and also tell you how to find a solution or something along those lines, it's like on another level.
I feel like a common theme that you all both bring up is we talk about benchmarks, we talk about the tech and the startups pitching all these new features, but so much of it is the implementation part, the people part, and building trust among the people. So much of it is honestly probably only 2 parts tech and then 8 parts change management. I'm curious how you all are thinking about, just on the people front, convincing people who might be skeptical of these solutions, how you've implemented some of these tools when you've had challenges, and power users who are excited about it. I imagine in every organization you have a little bit of both, and generally how you just build trust around the products that you're bringing to your end users.
I could use actually a specific case study, mini case study from Zapier's last 18 months, and it's on our customer support team. Customer support or things like it are one of the places where a lot of organizations go first when they're thinking about how automation and AI can help. And same thing was true for Zapier. I really admire how our support leader, Lauren, navigated this opportunity with her team. And here were the ingredients. Actually, I'll start with the outcomes, then I'll back into the ingredients. Here are the outcomes. The mission, by the way, this gets back to one of the points from earlier. It's like you start with the existing mission and goals of the team or organization. The mission of Zapier's customer support team is fast, accurate support. They have a measurable goal around each of those 2 qualities. Fast, that's average ticket handle time, so how quickly we can answer the customer's problem or solve the customer's problem. And the second, accurate, is basically customer satisfaction score. So from the customer's perspective, how well did we solve their problem? So, and by the way, that predates AI, right? So like clear mission, clear goals. Lauren could see from a mile away that AI could really help with both of those outcomes. But instead of just telling her team to use the AI or immediately jumping to a team-wide deployment of new ways of working or a new tool, she asked a couple very small pods within her team to do some experiments with AI. And they found some ways of working that produced great results. And so with that effectively proof of concept in hand, and by the way, like Patrick was saying, empowering folks who are closest to the work, right? So now you imagine who's demoing that proof of concept. Is it the executive of the team? No, they're just really opening the door. The folks that are showing the new way of working are their peers, right? It's the peers of the customer support team. And then they gave themselves effectively a year to adopt these new ways of working. So it's just a very planful kind of, we're going to row together. Now that we know this is possible, we're not going to change our performance expectations overnight. But now that we know this is possible, we think it means good things for us, because that makes these jobs honestly less tedious, more interesting, and more impactful. We know it's going to be good for our customers. And so because all stakeholders involved have something to benefit here, we are going to be clear that we're going to raise the bar, but we're going to do it in 12 months. And in the meantime, we're going to invest in helping everyone cross that finish line together. And so in addition to making these measurable improvements, so average ticket handle time goes down 50%. So that's a 2x increase in productivity on a per person basis. That's really meaningful. But there was one other thing that happened because of how well the team navigated this change together. Their employee engagement scores, and these questions are all on a scale of 100. Over that same 12-month period, they went up 20 or 30 points on almost every topic, which for those of us who pay attention to this kind of thing is pretty rare. And it's a little counterintuitive because they went out and they did a hard thing together that navigate a lot of change. They had to adopt new ways of working. But because of, to your point, because of the trust that the team had in their peers from the proof of concept and in their leadership, and because, to Patrick's point, they created a bit of a scaffold to help the team get there together, and anyone could see that they were being invested in. And now you have a customer support team that is genuinely elite in the thing that they do best professionally, and the data backs that up.
Yeah, I would. Sorry, yeah, I was going to add that. So when it comes to the private or public sector, I think Brandon and I both agree that this is a people business, right? So in terms of how we think about people, and in terms of like AI, we really want to focus on 3 different areas. Number 1 is we always want to build capacity. Number 2, the idea of collaboration or co-creation, is something that has to be embedded. And then the third piece is obviously, no matter if you're a K-12, no matter if you're in the private sector, Peter Drucker said it best, right? Culture eats, innovation for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, right? So I think those 3 things, capacity building, collaboration, co-creation, and culture is going to be key. When it comes to capacity building, PD training, workshops, having citizenship, AI day of AI, all those kinds of things, AI literacy is going to be key. The second around co-creation is being able to have, champions that lead the work, being able to have pilots. I love doing, research practice partnerships with universities as well, or even companies that want to do rapid cycle evaluations, because I think doing that is a good way of figuring out if that product could be trusted, right? And in terms of how you're doing the ETL process of data. So those are the things that matter. And the third piece, obviously, culture, really making sure that everything is by design. We make humans at the center of all we do. We talk openly about these AI tools, and this AI tool is not good. This AI tool is horrible, or this one is great. It's got a freemium feature that the district needs to get into a more enterprise environment. So I think all of that is going to be critical. I would also, I also want to shout out MIT's human flourishing framework. If you haven't seen what MIT is working on, I would Google it, because I want to shout out them, because I think in terms of 3 questions that I want to ask is, does this tool help, reclaim time for staff, for teachers, for students? Number 2, does it increase engagement and that sense of belonging? And then 3, does it build that agency and not dependency, which I'm starting to be a lot more dependent on AI now in my role. I think everyone on this call, or everyone here, is getting more and more dependent. My wife, who's a teacher, she's telling me that she's using AI daily, right? And so it's crazy.
I think those are really great examples of how you can create that right culture implementation internally. Patrick, I'm curious, one of the things that, a recent poll came out from PDK kind of suggesting that 70% of parents don't want grades or other personal information going into AI software, that, confidence in AI-driven lesson plans dropped dramatically between last year and this year. How do you think about talking to other external stakeholders and ensuring that, for potentially very legitimate pushback, how do you address concern of parents, board members, people not just within the internal organization, but are critical to the entire process?
I've been adamant that, data portability and, data privacy needs to be embedded in, all the tools. I've been saying this, even my days as a CTO and, a teacher on special assignment, ed tech person, is that, we haven't done a good job of asking partners and vendors to allow for data to be portable, to take their data with them, to get, these partners to disclose how they're using the data. I think as a district, obviously, we're under FERPA, we have state compliance that we have to make sure that we are obligated to have as well. So we have a Student Data Privacy Alliance agreement that we make sure that our vendors, our partners have to sign. But you and I both know, and everyone on this call here, let me get my light back on, I'm not moving. But you and I both know that no matter what, it's only a matter of when some of these companies, have data leaks because maybe something was misconfigured or whatever. So I think, being able to have more education, and then more transparent about the tools that we've implemented. So then, whether that looks like a data privacy card or whatever that looks like, I think that's where we need to be. I think, again, forcing and asking partners and vendors to create some type of portability, I think that's going to be key. I would say privacy has to be like a primary concern. Student data privacy has to be we need to know how you're storing the data, where you're storing it, what cloud provider you're using, et cetera. I think being able to disclose that along with the AI, nutrition facts is going to be key. So that's a long answer for a simple question, but safeguards, privacy policies, educating folks on how data, and then disclosing what tools the district is using. I think that's going to be critical as well.
I couldn't agree more, Patrick. I found like with many things over the last few years that AI has been a bit of a pressure test for existing org health and governance. So it's like, like the organization already has really strong procurement practices in place that answer to a lot of these data governance and privacy issues. Then, AI is just another kind of, wave of tools that have to answer to those same questions. Now, there may be some wrinkles in like how you get to the answers or what have you, but the fundamental questions that, kind of orgs with healthy procurement and data governance practices have had for years, I think serve us pretty well here too.
I think that's a great call out. And I know, Brandon, you recently posted that there's something like 97% AI adoption across employees at Zapier, which is an incredible statistic. I think a very strong reflection of that years of building a very strong culture and organizational health. And I know you're also working a lot with other companies externally and helping them with their adoption. When you see people who might not be at that level yet, what recommendations do you have?
Yeah, I think it goes back to where we started, which is, we have to start with a why. And that the first why is, kind of at that organization level, like how might AI help us take a huge step towards achieving our mission and having the impact in the world, that we wake up to make real every day. I guess got to start there, but can't stop there. That's just the beginning, because then, when it gets down to like, say, individual, like educators, administrators, ed tech practitioners, there's a why for different stakeholders within an organization too. And where it really becomes real is where, whether it's peer-to-peer learning or, external trainers or PD, like Patrick was saying, is like giving folks a sense of what's possible tends to, I've just seen rooms of amazing practitioners where like the anxiety starts to just melt away when we're able to share practical ways that AI can help folks in their daily work. And when they believe that's possible, now we're talking about, now we just wrote together. Now we're talking about important details around implementation and evaluation, but we know how to do that stuff, or at least we can get that help pretty handedly. But I think that the biggest, like, brick wall to kind of run through together is, why should we put the effort in the first place?
Well,
I want to thank both of you gentlemen for, sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
No, I was going to add, sorry, I'm an educator. I like to talk, but I do. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of models in the private sector that I think K-12 can take from. So, things like hyper-personalization, right? Omni-channel, right? That I know, oftentimes sales folks, business folks, they often talk about. But I do think that that's an exciting opportunity that AI can have on hyper-personalization, whether it's adaptive learning, it's, trying to make sure that there's assessments that matter, benchmarking, and then again, how that hyper-personalization helps automate the choices that students make and then the choices that the teachers make. And again, about expanding their agency. I just think that, making sure that the kids and students and staff are able to realize their passions, and then give them feedback that helps build that confidence and resilience. I often ask the question of, what is one human trait that AI can't replace? And it's making sure that we have a caring adult in every room. It's love. It's all that kind of stuff that one of the reasons why we go to school in the first place. It's socialization. So, I mean, that's a loaded answer, but I just wanted to end with that because I wanted to make sure that that the AI tools and the AI systems, I'm very for it, but I just want to make sure that humans always stay in the loop.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way to end and wrap this up. Is right at the end of the day, trust is a very human concept, right? And that's what we're talking about, regardless if we're talking about K-12 and learning or in the in the corporate space. We're talking about people, and it's about fostering the humanity of it all, right? And creating those environments. And so, I appreciate the conversation around collaboration and co-creation and really focusing on the culture that enables us to be able to deploy and think about effective implementation. Claire, what else did, I'm sure you had a lot on your takeaway as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually one of my big takeaways is, and Jen, you summed it up perfectly, but I think I've been tracking the AI space from at least what the vendors are outputting and from what the big AI labs are outputting. And everyone was saying that this year was the year of the agents. And I still think there, from a capability standpoint, it's exciting to see these systems become more agentic. But I think my takeaway is, given the human part of trust, there's still a lot of work to be done. And even from an enterprise or school front, and trust that needs to be built before we hand off these systems to fully automate the work of a human without a human in the loop. So that's probably my biggest takeaway, that gut check that, despite the capabilities, there's still the actual implementation question for these agents.
Well, thank you again, both, for joining us for our first webinar, and we look forward to people joining for the remainders as well in the coming weeks.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks,
Thank you,
Claire.
guys.